I'm joined now by Senior Advisor to the President, David Plouffe. Welcome back to Meet the Press.
Morning, Dave.
So, from your vantage point, you're inside the room. Is that overly rosy, or are you that close?
Well, we don't have a deal. Everyone is cognizant, as Chuck Todd just reported on, both the legislative clock and, more importantly, the default clock. So the hours are ticking here. I think what's clear is that there's general agreement that we're going to have deficit reduction in two stages. The first is going to be something the parties largely agree on, about $1 trillion in deficit reduction. The second stage is going to be the trickier elements of entitlement reform and tax reform, which this super committee is going to be charged with. And I think it's going to be incumbent on the leaders in Congress to appoint people to those committees who are going to drive to yes, to try and compromise, get out of their party's comfort zone.
Let me be clear, though. What will the president accept as a deal?
Well, first of all, it's clear. Our economy is obviously not as strong as any of us would like it to be. This debt ceiling cloud has harmed our economy. Why on earth would we want to go through this again a few short months from now?
So it has to be through 2012.
For the economy, number one. Number two, we want to make sure that if there is an enforcement mechanism, and again, the committee is not going to be charged with just doing spending cuts only. The committee is going to be charged with looking at our entire deficit reduction problem and look at things like tax reform and revenue. You want something to compel this committee to act. That was part of the president's approach that he laid out to the country a few months ago, that there would be a debt cap that would enforce action. So you want to have something that compels both parties to act. Because I do think there's going to be a lot of pressure, rightly, on this committee to produce something that Congress can vote on.
But a lot of people watching this have got to be wondering, what's actually going on today? What is the fighting about? So first stage, you cut government spending over a 10-year period to raise the debt ceiling. Part of that is a second stage, another committee in Washington that looks at really making the hard decisions. And then if they don't make the hard decisions, something forces Congress's hand. So again, what will the president accept as a consequence to force the Congress's hand?
Well, again, it might be more enjoyable to negotiate this with you this morning. I can't get into a great amount of details, but I think that, one, we have to make sure that you can agree on the initial set of spending cuts. The process for the committee, it's essential, we think, that the debt ceiling get extended off into the future so it doesn't hurt the economy. Then we want to make sure whatever enforcement mechanism is something, one, that if it were triggered, you think the country could live with. But secondly, strong enough to compel folks to act. And I think that you see, this has been a healthy debate. I think the country's learned a lot about our debt and deficit problems. I think there's been some education here in Washington. And I think what's clear is, where the president stands is where the American people stand. That if we're going to do another set of deficit reduction, over $1 trillion, they're going to insist it be balanced. Because if you're a middle-class family, if you're
But it's not going to be balanced. There's no tax increases in this. The president said it had to have tax increases, had to be balanced. Yeah. That's not what's in this deal.
Well, listen, this committee is going to be charged with coming up with additional deficit reduction. There's no way to do it without smart entitlement reform and tax reform.
So you only get to potential tax increases as part of a second stage of spending cuts that a committee has to agree to.
Well, the first stage, it's clear in this first stage what we're going to get is an extension of the debt ceiling.
Right.
You're going to get that first set of spending cuts over $1 trillion, and then you're going to get this committee that's going to be charged with reporting out, hopefully, a balanced deficit reduction.
But what is healthy about this debate? I mean, you talk about another super committee. 17 months ago, the president convened a debt commission. The proposals, recommendations from which were not acted on by the president or Congress. Now you're talking about another committee. Nobody's yet making the hard choices about 2/3 of the budget, which is entitlement spending. So what's healthy about this debate?
Well, it's certainly not been a healthy debate in the short term. I think the American people are sitting back and saying, I'm going through tough things in my life, and these folks are sitting there arguing with each other, unwilling to compromise, do tough things, particularly the House Republicans this week. But I would say this. The president laid out several months ago a $4 trillion deficit reduction plan. What we were striving to do with the Speaker of the House was a big deficit reduction package that wouldn't have a super committee. We would have done it right now. That wasn't possible. The Speaker of the House, pulled by the right wing of his party, walked away from that. But the president's going to be committed over these next few months, and I think members of Congress need to be as well, that we need to finish the job here. And the way you're going to finish that job is to have a balanced deficit reduction package that doesn't harm the economy.
There is a story about the debt ceiling that goes like this. Back in the 1990s, the United States was shrinking its national debt at a rapid pace. Serious people actually worried about dislocations from having too little government debt. If it hadn't been for two wars, the tax cuts of 2001 and 2003, the housing meltdown, and the subsequent financial crisis and recession, the nation's finances would be in fine condition today. And the only obstacle to getting there again, this narrative goes, is political dysfunction in Washington. If the Republicans and Democrats would just split their differences on spending and taxes and raise the debt ceiling, we could all get back to our real lives, problem solved. Except it's not that way at all. For all our obsessing about it, the national debt is a singularly bad way of measuring the nation's financial condition. It includes only a small portion of the nation's total liabilities, and is focused on the past. An honest assessment of the country's projected revenue and expenses over the next generation would show a reality different from the apocalyptic visions conjured by both Democrats and Republicans during the debt ceiling debate. It would be much worse. That's why the posturing about whether and how Congress should increase the debt ceiling by August 2nd has been a hollow exercise. Failure to increase the borrowing limit would harm American prestige and the global financial system. But that's nothing compared with the real threats to the United States' long-term economic health, which will begin to strike with full force toward the end of this decade, if not sooner. Sharply rising per capita health care spending, along with the graying of the population, a generation of workers turning into an outsized generation of beneficiaries. Hoover Institution Senior Fellow Michael J. Boskin, who is President George H.W. Bush's chief economic advisor, says, "The word unsustainable doesn't convey the problem enough, in my opinion." In other words, America is in a lot of trouble. Even the $4 trillion grand bargain on debt reduction hammered out by President Barack Obama and House Speaker John Boehner, Republican, Ohio, a deal that collapsed nearly as quickly as it came together, would not have gotten the United States where it needs to be. A June analysis by the Congressional Budget Office concluded that keeping the United States' ratio of debt to gross domestic product at current levels until the year 2085, if not sooner, to avoid scaring off investors would require spending cuts, tax hikes, or a combination of both equal to 8.3% of GDP each year for the next 75 years versus the most likely, i.e. alternative scenario. That translates to at least $15 trillion over the next decade, or more than 3 times what President Obama and Boehner were considering. So, you start to see why, absent signs of a serious commitment to deficit reduction, the rating services are warning they may downgrade the federal government's AAA rating, even if Congress does meet the August 2nd deadline. Fortunately, our debt hole is escapable, but digging out requires that leaders of both parties come to terms with just how deep it is. We've been heading the wrong way for years, even in the late 1990s, when official Washington was jubilant because the national debt briefly shrank. Fiscal gap calculations showed that the government was quietly getting into deeper and deeper trouble. As president of the American Action Forum, a self-described center-right policy institute, says, "We're just in a world of hurt." Yes, the federal government has been kicking the can down the road for a long time, and now it's time to pay the piper. It really is about what kind of world are we leaving to the future generations. Again, Jeremiah chapter 18, verse 7. "At what instant I shall speak concerning a nation, and concerning a kingdom, to pluck up and to pull down, and to destroy it. 8. If that nation against whom I have pronounced turn from their evil, I will repent of the evil that I thought to do unto them. 9. And at what instant I shall speak concerning a nation, and concerning a kingdom, to build and to plant it. 10. if it do evil in my sight, if it obey not my voice, then I will repent of the good wherewith I said I would benefit them. Luke chapter 21, verse 32. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass away, till all be fulfilled. 33. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away. 34. And take heed to yourselves, lest at any time your hearts be overcharged with partying and drunkenness and cares of this life, and so that day come upon you unawares. 35. For as a snare shall come on all them that dwell on the face of the whole earth. 36. Watch ye, therefore, and pray always, that ye may be accounted worthy to escape all these things that are coming to pass, and to stand before the Son of Man. Revelation chapter 22, verse 12. And, behold, I come quickly, and my reward is with me, to give every human according as his work shall be. 13. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. It's time for all prophecy to be fulfilled. Everything is connected, and everything is numbered. The fourth angel is sounding,